My name is Taryn Cleaves, and I am presenting Children and Pornography as a part of Children at Risk. There are two areas to consider. The first are children being used in the making of pornography, and the second is children viewing pornography. We're going to start with children being used in pornographic material. We need to know the basics on pornography. 40 million American people regularly visit porn sites. 25% of all search engine queries are related to pornography, and search engines get 116,000 queries every day related to child pornography. This infographic shows the most up-to-date statistics for the United States. I think it's interesting to note that sex and porn are among the top 5 search terms for kids under the age of 18, and 1 out of 3 pornography viewers are women. This gives us a lot of validity to the fact that children are at risk in terms of their pornography usage and involvement. So what is child pornography exactly? Well, legally, it refers to content that depicts sexually explicit activities involving a child. And legally, children are defined as anyone under the age of 18. The United States has some of the harshest laws for those convicted of child pornography. However, simulated child pornography is completely legal. And what that is a digital way of making adults look like children. We need to know where this is happening, and the truth is that it's happening both domestically and globally. In 2005, the State Department said that between 100,000 and 300,000 children are at risk of commercial sexual exploitation every day, and that's just in the United States. Globally, over 1 million children are at risk. In 2006, U.S. attorneys handled 82.8% more child pornography cases than they had in 1994, just over a decade later. I think it's safe to assume that this dramatic increase is due to the rise of the internet. Here's a map of the world, and as you can see, which country has which laws. There's a large percentage where the possession of any kind of pornography, including child pornography, is completely legal, and less so of those who say that possession of any kind of pornography is illegal. Now we need to talk a little bit about sex trafficking in this talk because they're closely related even though they're not the same thing. Because children who are featured in pornographic materials are often victims of sex trafficking. And sex traffickers target, trick, and traumatize their victims, and it's very easy to do when they're homeless or runaway, or they come from highly dysfunctional or abusive homes. This infographic shows information on domestic minor sex trafficking in the U.S. However, you can see circled in blue the stat that says pornography rewires the male brain to become dependent on chemicals. I disagree with this only in the sense that it's not just the male brain that is affected by the viewing of pornography. It's also the female brain. Remember, we saw earlier that 1 out of 3 viewers are women. This is not just a male problem. Child pornography is one of the fastest growing businesses online. It has become a $3 billion a year industry, and that's just in the United States. Globally, it's about $4.9 billion. In 2008, the Internet Watch Foundation found over 1,500 individual child abuse domains. And of all known domains, 58% are housed in the United States. And this makes the United States, the one with the harshest laws, the largest producer of child pornography around the world. In 2005, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children conducted a study of arrested child pornographers. You can see the results. 83% of those arrested had images with children between the ages of 6 and 12, and unfortunately, it goes all the way down to ages 1 and 3. There is no sanctity or innocence of age with the makers of pornography. How can we help our children stay safe? Well, the first thing we need to do is recognize the signs for children who are victims of sexual abuse or sex trafficking. Here's a list of the signs, but we need to remember this is not just happening in third world countries. This is happening right here in the U.S. As ministers, we need to know who we can give referrals to, and knowing when to give referrals is very important. As ministers, we also need to know that we are legally responsible to report all suspected or confirmed cases of child abuse, which includes child pornography. Let's switch gears and talk about children viewing pornography and why that is a risk. So, do children really view pornography anyways? Well, the short answer is yes. Most first-time views are accidental through pop-up ads or mistyping. But we need to know that the average age of the first-time view seems to be between ages 11. 51% of male students and 32% of female students report that their first exposure was before the age of 12. And remember that if child pornography is available on the internet, that means that our children who are under the age of 12 could get a hold of those images. The other thing we need to know is that a pornography addiction is harmful. The addiction is real, and it has strong roots in domestic violence and rape and in general hatred and violence towards women. Pornography addiction also inhibits healthy sexuality, especially in monogamous relationships. And we also need to know that children are created as sexual beings as well. So any consequence of regular viewing of pornography that applies to adults applies to children. And oftentimes it can be made worse in children, as their brains have not yet fully developed, so their risk for some behaviors are even higher. What we need to know is that pornographers are now targeting children ages 7 to 9 in the United States. And you might ask, well, how are they doing that? What they're doing is they're researching the favorite websites of children in that age bracket. Then they'll make a website with a different domain name or maybe a few letters off of those favorite websites. So for instance, if a favorite website is Nickelodeon.com, they'll make a pornographic website under Nickelodeon.net, knowing that children or their parents will mistype and land on that website. And what they're hoping is to hook children on their first view. They know that success means a lifetime customer, and this tactic is currently 100% legal. We also need to talk about sexting in this risk, because as you can see, sexting is the sending of sexually explicit photos or text through one's mobile phone to friends or potential suitors. And in some states, sexting is considered child pornography, even among consenting minors. So for instance, if a 16-year-old female sends a nude photo of herself to her 16-year-old boyfriend, there are states that would label that child pornography and require those students to label themselves as a sex offender on the National Registry, which of course follows you for the rest of your life. This infographic offers 4 good tips for those who work with teens. And it says we need to remind them how fast text and pictures can spread over the internet and inform them of the consequences of that. And then monitor them. We can't leave them alone with this technology, never having talked with them about the consequences. Part of advocating for children and youth at risk is education. Now you might ask, how is porn addictive? And this infographic shows that chemicals are released in your brain whether you're participating in a sex act or viewing a sex act. Those chemicals are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and epinephrine. What happens is your brain gets rewired to accommodate those extra chemicals on a regular basis. You build up a tolerance and a dependency to those chemicals, so you go from wanting the pleasure chemicals every once in a while in order to feel good to needing them just to exist. So we need to know that sex is not just physical, and that our brains are involved in every sex act, including viewing pornography. Now the following shows us what can happen. What are the results of a porn addiction? Well, the first is ruined relationships. 56% of divorces involve at least one of the people having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. Another is altered behavior. We change our perceptions and our attitudes towards the opposite sex. The loss of happiness is huge. There is a significant relationship between frequent porn use and feelings of loneliness and major depression. There are limits of success, as 1/3 of addicts lose their jobs. And there is a change of belief that can happen over time, a loss of hope for sexual monogamy, the view that promiscuity is normal, and less trust between intimate couples. So how can we help educate our children about the dangers of pornography? Well, first, we need to not be afraid to have open and honest conversations with children about sex. And we need to start young. We cannot wait until a child is 11, 12, or 13 to have our first conversations with them. And that goes with parenting with a plan. We need to know where we want to go and how to teach sex holistically. Oftentimes, children and teenagers are given the message, just don't have sex, but that's not a realistic view of what they need to do. Our sexuality is God-given and a good thing as long as it's in the appropriate boundaries and contexts. We must teach that our sexuality is a part of who we've been created to be. Also, as ministers, we are tied directly to both the children and parents of each family, so we have to take steps to educate our parents about the current culture of their children. We need to provide as many resources as possible, and sometimes that means being a resource ourselves and a place of support to parents. I think it's interesting to note that 44% of teens have lied about their age when online. While some social media sites require users to be 13 or older, there is no system in place to stop individuals from lying. And I think that really puts parents as the first line of defense to knowing what their children are doing online and putting appropriate boundaries in place. Now I want to offer you all some resources and help where you... Finally, I would like to offer some resources and help that we can offer to those who are needing them. There's a few websites and a few books. I highly recommend them all. Also, know that June is Internet Safety Month. This is a great time to remind parents how to talk with their kids and to talk with kids about how to stay safe online. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.